Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We are a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works and the Cosmere. I'm David, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm Windrunner.
Also joining me is Evgeni.
Hi, I'm Argent, and for this episode, I have brought a drink that I don't normally drink because it's not garbage, but it's whatever. I brought some Jack Daniels. I didn't have any Texas whiskey to sip on the episode, but I have this Tennessee whiskey with, by the way, if you haven't noticed, the price tag still on. And in a very American fashion, I'm drinking Jack and Coke. It's very basic. I don't like it.
Well, I hope you continue to not enjoy that. Also joining us is Danielle.
I'm back. Very happy.
And
do you have a username?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I do. I do have a username. FelCandy. I have not been on one of these in a while, as you can obviously tell.
We're all figuring it out today.
That's all right.
And finally, we also have Marvin.
Hi, I'm Paleo, coming to you from New Cargo today. So I thought I'd fly over the Atlantic for this one and join us from there.
We're like time neighbors, same location, but like different time.
Looks like a beautiful day in New Cargo today. And I am Windrunner on the forums, not Chaos today. And we are doing things a little bit differently because today we are talking about the new audio original Lux, which not everybody has listened to. So we have a little bit of a different cast today of everyone who managed to get through the audiobook and wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I finished it 4 hours ago. I had a deadline and I made it.
Yeah. I mean, I shake my head, but I also finished it yesterday, so.
Well, you guys will have to remind me because I have memories, but not super clear ones. So I'm sure I'm going to forget some stuff. Jumping into it, just to talk a little about what Lux is, in case you have not heard about it, this is a co-authored Audible exclusive with another author, Stephen Michael Bowles, who I believe was one of Brandon's students at one point. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this is an attempt to continue the original Reckoners trilogy. And so it does have a different main cast, but they are hoping to bring it together and do an entire second trilogy here that will eventually probably join up with the original characters. It is an audio exclusive for 2 years, and it was originally written and plotted as 3 novellas that got kind of squished together into one book when they decided to actually make it a full trilogy. And so I think we are going to launch right in with our non-spoilery reactions. So if you have not read Lux and you don't want to get spoiled by it, you should be pretty okay with this. We're just going to do some general impressions and talk around it, and then we'll let you know when we head into our actual spoilery full discussion like we love to do. All right, who's got thoughts on their reactions to Lux?
I have thoughts. So, Reckoners was actually one of my very first Sanderson introductions. I read Mistborn first, and then I read Steelheart, and I loved it. I read all 3 of them like really, really quickly, maybe within a week or so. And that's kind of the reason why I kept reading Sanderson. So I have a special place in my heart for Reckoners. And this book, even though it was not like a full Brandon Sanderson name book, it felt like a really good continuation of the series to me. The tone was a little bit darker in my opinion, but it was a lot of action-packed scenes, and I don't know. I just really enjoyed it, and I really liked being able to get back into this universe.
So you say it's not fully a Brandon Sanderson thing, but listeners and viewers, I will direct you to the cover of Lux, which has Audible original Brandon Sanderson in massive letters. And Stephen Michael Bowles in like font 12. So
well, that's just marketing for you.
Yeah, that is just marketing. Yeah, but it's
The tone was very different. So I did notice that it was not a Brandon Sanderson book. You know, it had his name on it, but it was not written purely by him. So it was nice to do. And then also, because it's an audio book only production, that was a unique experience too, because they wrote it specifically, right? Didn't they write it specifically to be read on audio? It felt very more like cinematic and more it's easier to read this as an audiobook than it would be for like a book that was just, you know, a written novel and then read.
It was planned as an audio original from the start, at least. Yeah.
It was. And I know for the original, the audio original by Brandon.
Not confusing.
There is an audiobook that is only for audio called The Original. That's what the is referring to.
Which is Brandon co-wrote with Mary Robinette. Cool. And I know for that one, Mary Robinette did a lot to make it for audio. I don't know how much that was in effect for this book.
Yeah. One of the things I definitely noticed as I was listening to this was, so with the original, it was it wasn't very clear to me that it's meant for audio, but in retrospect, a lot of the he said, she says were gone from that book. Because listening to Lux, a lot of these things were not omitted. And there were many instances where there would be a sequence of, you know, 1 or 2 words of dialogue, and then he said, and then 1 or 2 words of dialogue, and then she said, and like that would repeat for 3-4 lines, which is obviously not ideal for audio. It just sounds clunky, and especially with a narrator who does such a good job at conveying the different voices of the characters, it is just not necessary. Like, there's so many times when one of the characters, let's say Herschel, who has a very distinct voice, would say something, and like, I don't need the Herschel said at the end because I instantly recognize the voice because it has been established so well. So in that context, I don't think as much work has been done to like tailor this experience for the medium. But I'm sure some of it was like they knew this would be coming out on audio first, and so they would make some changes.
And building off of that, there's when one of the characters gets introduced, there's the comment about, oh, this character has the most Texan accent to ever Texan accent. And I'm like, the fact that they wrote that out like wasn't necessary because it was obvious. McLeod Andrews, who was the narrator, was also the narrator from the original trilogy and was incredibly popular for those. So I'm glad they got him back. I didn't need that because I could very obviously tell that his Texan accent was significantly stronger.
Yeah, I think that's just in general the difference. It's an audio exclusive, not an audio original. That's like the distinction to make there. It still can work really well as a book, whereas the original, I do think they had some also like sound effects that added to the narrative that we didn't get here. So, and if you don't have those in a written text, so it wouldn't work as well in the original. They would have to adapt it a little bit or to make it work in text. Whereas this one, it was just straight up read from a novel in a way.
Which is not a bad thing. Yeah, I still really enjoyed the book.
I'm curious when, because it's supposed to come out with Delacorte in 2 years, they've said, as an actual print. And I'm curious what happens, like how they adapt that if the dialogue tags probably have to come back, I assume. And like, are there in some way so McLeod Andrews knows whose voice he's saying for sure instead of having to figure it out as he's reading through it? But I'm just curious how that ends up happening. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, I imagine an audiobook arrives as essentially a script to whoever is going to be narrating it, whoever's going to be reading it. And so the script will have information about, I mean, obviously the script that arrived with the narrator this time did have all of the tags. So that's not an issue here. But with the original, for example, I imagine they are either going to tweak the text a little bit so it's clearer in printed word who's saying things, and like all the fact that there's music going on and stuff like that, or the script itself will have tags that say, okay, well, this person is speaking here, this person is speaking there, even though there are no dialogue tags.
Yeah, when the original was released, in one of the interviews or live streams that Mary Robinette was on, it's like she did talk about making those sort of like editorial changes when they got around to releasing it in print. So as for like my thoughts, it's like I haven't reread Reckoners since Calamity came out. It's like I liked it, but it wasn't one of the main draws. But I actually really enjoyed Lux, and I was expecting to like it because Brandon has a very good track record in writing things that I like, and he was involved in this. But I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed it, and it has actually made me want to go back and reread the original trilogy because, like, oh, I do really like this world, and so we'll see when I work in a Reckoners reread because there's a lot of books I want to read.
So as someone who's only read the original Reckoners trilogy this year, like for the first time, it was quite nice to so soon after that have a new book that was a lot better than Calamity. So and I really liked it a lot overall, and it has some flaws, I think, that Lux it is, but overall I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to them continuing the trilogy and want to see where they take it, because they have definitely opened things up a bit. Let's just say that.
For me, Lux was... So I've always liked the Reckoner series, but it's never been one of my favorites. Like I think I unironically like Alcatraz better than the Reckoners. I have a lot more fun, or at least I think I have a lot more fun with Alcatraz. Reckoners kind of, that's fine. It's not a Brandon level book in my mind, but they're fine. I don't regret reading them or anything. And I think this one follows suit in many ways. It has a lot of... So some of the things that it has going for it that are good are that it has some of the things that I find quintessential to how I view Reckoner stories. So we have epics with interesting powers that we haven't necessarily seen before, or at least are not like the traditional Marvel and DC superpowers. We have interesting reveals about the weaknesses of those epics that come in like very nicely structured and plotted moments with very neat foreshadowing. We'll talk about this later when we talk about the spoilery half of the episode, or spoilery 80%. But one of the things I have always enjoyed in Reckoner stories is the foreshadowing to the reveal of an epic's weakness. And I think this story does a great job at following suit in that regard. Another thing that I find quintessential in the Reckoner story is the weird location. So we had Chicago has turned into Steel, Chicago. In Steelheart, we had New York is now underwater in Firefight, and we have what was the city in?
It's Atlanta. Atlanta becomes made of salt and is now Ildithia, I think.
I think so, yeah. And it just kind of travels Atlanta.
Sort of creeping.
Yeah. And so in this story, we have the floating city of Lux, right? This paradise that is above the clouds. And it in many ways, it's an actual like parallel to like heaven, right? So I am very much looking forward to this series continuing and us seeing more like interesting takes on what other cities are going to be changed in what cool ways. That to me is really interesting in the Reckoner story. But on other notes, I absolutely agree with Danny that this is a darker story. There are moments that I was like, well, I didn't think Brandon would go there, and maybe Brandon did not in fact go there. Maybe that's Steven's influence in the story, but I don't know that. It's definitely darker than the original series, although it's not like grim dark levels of dark. It's more individual moments are.
Yeah. But I could see it bridging the gap to grimdark if it was written even just for a little bit older audience, personally.
Yeah. It's definitely in that direction, right? Mm-hmm. It was fine. I have some issues with continuity things, and I have some issues with some of the characters not being inconsistently written, but like not doing as much as I would have wanted them to do. This is hard to talk about without spoilers. But it was fine, right? It's my opinion of this is not much better or much worse than the original series.
Okay, I think that's fair. For me, I was one of those who, like, I read Steelheart and I liked it okay. I read Firefight and I was like, this was good. I really liked Firefight. And then I got to Calamity and I was so put off by it. Like, it left a really, really sour taste in my mouth. I thought it should have been 4 books. Like, it was just, I was like, oh, I'm never going to read this again. Mm-hmm. So I got this on a whim. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely not going to go back to the Reckoner's verse, but I had an extra Audible credit and I was like, okay, fine. And I actually was really, really surprised by it. And I thought, wow, I thought it really fit well in the world. And I think I like it more than Calamity or Steelheart for sure. And I think that the darker tone worked really well for me. I felt like this was a world that deserved that. This was kind of a Mistborn Era 1 kind of darker world where you're like, oh, I guess Brandon does do some dark stuff, even though he kind of makes you look away from it sometimes. Yep. And I really, really, I thought it retread some similar ground from the original trilogy. There was some stuff that I was like, oh, like, I feel the protagonist was not that different from David in my mind, even though I really liked him. And I also thought there are some structural flaws, I think, that exist in the story, but like, that's going to happen when you squish 3 novellas into 1 novel. And the thing that really stood out to me was I loved the motivator tech in this book. I always felt like it kind of got pushed into Calamity because Brandon didn't really want to dig into it. And I was like, oh, David loves the Reckoner tech. And oh, by the way, we're probably going to do full regular Reckoner's trilogy spoilers, so just be warned with that. But
that seems safe,
it was like a show point for this. Like, I was like, oh, they are really doing cool stuff with the motivators. And I thought that was huge for the story.
Yeah. Thinking about like the definite darker tone to this book versus the original trilogy, like, it's almost as if like this is still written for the target audience for the original people, just aged up. It's not written for what that target audience would be today. It's like those people that like the original trilogy are now 5 years older. Mm-hmm. They're not teenagers. They're like early 20s. And like, so I actually like that. It's a little bit darker. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that was intentional or if that's just a happy accident, but
yeah, I will second the opinion on on motivators. This book does a lot for motivators that that Rhythm of War did for Fabrials, and this is, I don't know if I would classify motivators as Magitech, but they're essentially Magitech, and
they're Magitech. They're 100% Magitech.
Yeah.
A lot more Magitech in the original trilogy, and this book sort of has started to try or make it seem less Magitech-y, make it more sci-fi in that it is like more explain it a little more, but yeah, there's still Magitech, essentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I think we are ready to we've gone as far as we can, and we're ready to transition out of our non-spoilers. So if you have not listened to Lux and you are a spoiler-adverse person, I would recommend stopping listening right now.
So Jax is one of the Texas Reckoners, and the book starts with them launching an attack against the floating city of Lux, and in particular, two of the epics. Life Force, who has magic healing abilities and can apparently heal his entire force of immortal soldiers, which is a little intimidating. And then Wingflare, who one makes the city float and two makes all of the soldiers float, which is even more intimidating. And so altercations happen and plans have to change, and something very bad happens to one of the characters. Brigand gets like half his face torn off, which is so fun.
Because of the carelessness of Jax, too. Like,
yes. Yeah. They were going to abandon the plan, but Jax said, like, no, I can make it work. And then we flash back to when Jax is a little kid and he's with his older brother in Boston. And his older brother gets killed by Lovestruck.
Yes.
That's her name. Yeah.
Not just killed, brutally murdered.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because her epic ability is to make your blood flow backwards. I'm like, and when it mentioned that, I'm like, okay, that's a weird epic power. And then I'm like, oh, hearts are made of one-way valves. And it's just the way it's like the heart popping, and I'm like, oh, this is not the original trilogy. Jax does survive and is eventually found by Prof, who brings him to Texas, the Coop, and puts him under the authority of Zeph, who trains him to be an awesome reckoner. And some years later, they are joined by Paige, who Zeph also trains. There's a lot.
Yeah, I think we can. You
were going into a lot more detail than I.
Yeah.
I can fast forward it a little bit if you want.
Why don't you fast forward it? Because there's so much.
More or less, Texas Reckoners have decided, because Prof is pretty excited that they managed to kill Steelheart, that they're going to take out Lux. It goes terribly. Texas Reckoners are destroyed almost entirely, and Jax and a few of the remaining people end up going to Lux for a little more standard Reckoner style, destroy it from the inside out. Plans go awry. There are betrayals. There are lost loves that suddenly return back to life, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. There was no way she was actually dead. That's Paige. And ultimately, it kind of ends up with a lot of individually taking down the epics that are that are supporting the city, and ultimately defeating Life Force, who is sucking the life out of his helpless prisoners. And they successfully destroy the city. And so ultimately, Paige has been horribly injured, or it's her old injury that's come back now that Life Force's powers are failing. He injects her with some sort of substance that is made from his blood or him. It's gross. She heals for unknown reasons and is unconscious. When she wakes up, she has Deathrise, this other kind of monstrous personality talking in her head. And it is kind of changing her attitude towards the people around her. Like, she kind of looks at Jax with real contempt. And Calamity goes out in the sky, signaling that we have reached co-linearity with our actual original trilogy, and now they are ending at basically the same point. Yep. So that's what happens. And do we want to just jump right in and talk about what the heck Deathrise is?
I just want to say that when I was listening to this, I didn't know it was planned to continue on. I thought, like, oh, okay, they're doing this like standalone thing.
Oh,
and then I got to the end. I'm like, please tell me there's more, because that's definitely a place to end things.
Yeah,
I want.
Yep.
I have thoughts on Deathrise, but to get to them, there are a couple of things from earlier in the story that I think are worth recalling.
Mhm.
One of them is that inside Lux, inside kind of the lab section of the city, there is amidst all the other regular doors, there's a special looking door that's like blood red with a message or text written on it in a weird kind of inconsistent, almost childlike not font, but like handwriting type of thing, that says "Rise anew," I believe is the phrase.
Mhm.
And the first time we see that door, we don't learn anything about it, other than they can't find out what's on the other side. We see this from the point of view of the Texas Reckoners, and Jax is just continuously unsettled by this door. The next time we see the door, we do so from the point of view of Life Force himself. And that is significant because there are several POVs from Life Force we get. And I think that's a really neat thing to do. And throughout previous POVs, we have been told about this, what he refers to as demon inside him that like pushes him towards aggression and violence. There's instances where this demon is pushing him towards like ripping somebody's eyeball out and then stomping it in front of them so they can see that. So like that's a violent demon, right?
Well,
or like reaching down someone's mouth and throat and like pulling their lungs out or whatever it was. Dark story. Anyway, so the next time we see that, we do so from Life Force's POV, and he is with Brigand at that point, the traitor Texas Reckoner, and he takes him beyond the door, where there are these essentially. They were. What was it called? It was Chrysalis something.
I thought it was
Yeah,
crystalline. Maybe I'm wrong.
I thought it was like Chrysalis Chamber or something.
Something like that. Let me search my ebook. Oh no, never mind. Anyway, so but there is this feeling of like metamorphosis and being born and like changing and things like that. And so he takes Brigand there, and it is clear that this is not the first time he has taken people in those chambers, because he's conducting experiments there. And what he does is he pulls a syringe from like a pocket essentially, and then injects Brigand with presumably the same thing that he injects Paige later on. Yeah. And then he starts counting. Obviously he's looking to see how long Brigand lasts essentially, and whether there will be any side effects and things like that. And for about a minute and a half, nothing happens. And then Brigand just starts panicking. He reports something essentially wriggling and wiggling inside him. And presumably, eventually, he just like, I don't know, kills himself or dies from whatever is happening inside him.
He goes insane, and then like the body deteriorates.
Yeah. And so what Life Force does to Paige at the end is clearly kind of the final phase of these experiments that he has been doing so far. And how much of those experiments are Life Force and how much of them are Deathrise is unclear to me, because there is definitely a reading of this story where it is Deathrise, or at least Deathrise's influence, that is pushing Life Force to essentially find a new host, a better host for this entity that we now know is Deathrise.
See, my interpretation of things was that Deathrise was the consequence of like all of the experiments that Life Force was doing on himself to meld different epic powers inside of himself. Like that created Deathrise. And also going back to like the rise anew on the door, when I got to that point, I just so happened to be looking at my phone, and the tagline of the book is "Avenge what's yours and arise anew." And I'm like,
nice.
That's creepy. Definitely creepy. But yeah, it's like, as part of Life Force's powers, he has to be touching the person he transfers the wound to. So he does that by injecting their blood into his bloodstream, which is weird, and I don't quite know. I'm glad that later on in the book they mentioned that he doesn't know how many people died of various blood diseases from doing that. Because I'm like, unless you're AB positive, like, you don't want to be injecting random blood into yourself. And even then, but it, like, he describes like feeling like the foreign DNA wriggling in his veins, which is very reminiscent of what, like, how Deathrise is. So I think it's like all of these factors came together, and it's like created Deathrise, who is apparently sapient. It is a very fitting, like, post-Calamity villain, I think. Because, like, Calamity's no longer an issue. There need to be some sort of big bad in the world.
I would like somebody to remind me of the actual mechanics of how Calamity, because I remember that Calamity granted powers to epics in a very kind of a gifter kind of way. But I don't remember the exact mechanics behind that.
You're assuming we got the actual mechanics for that.
Well,
in Herschel's backstory, where Steelheart showed up, it just kind of showed him as like kind of just going into a bit of a trance or coma or something, and then coming back and having this complete mind change. So I don't know if he was choosing specific people or if he was just choosing at random, and their past kind of gave them specific types of powers. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
So,
because their weaknesses are based on their past. So are their strengths based on their personality or their...
The powers are partially genetic, because we see that people who, like, father and son have the same powers, identical twins have the same powers in some cases. And I know that we saw David ultimately get his Reckoner power, or his epic powers, in Firefight, but it was kind of weird because he also, like, wasn't he like conquering his weakness the moment he got them or something? But I feel like he got, like, there was like a heat and he was kind of like transfixed by Calamity. That is my memory, but I don't think we got a ton about how it happens.
But also, like, he has the same abilities as Steelheart, who he is not related to,
which I hate. But
what I am driving towards is, I am wondering if it's less the combination of just a bunch of different bloods, a bunch of different people inside Life Force's body, and more the fact that he is experimenting with mixing epic DNA with his own. And like, if every epic has, and this is what I was trying to figure out, if every epic has essentially a little bit of, like, I keep trying to go to the Cosmere, a little bit of Calamity's essence or whatever, maybe if you combine enough of that, investiture seeks sapience or develops sapience. But if you combine enough of that, you give birth to an entity that is its own thing, right? And all of this, like, violence and negative emotions that Paige is experiencing at the end is just a result of this symbiote, essentially.
I could almost see it also like, I do kind of like this idea of it being sort of the I don't know, the combination of all these, or the combination of Calamity-related DNA, I guess. But it could also be like that the fact that Life Force, whenever he touches something thing. He can presumably, he says he's a gifter, but it's not totally clear to me whether he actually gifts powers or it's just like people can also take from the pool of like the people who are in the chambers below Lux, or if it's actually gifting powers. But because they also have to have access to all the other ones, so it's not just those they touch, but whatever. So it could be that because he's sort of touching this this entity, it is also able to use the healing factor a little bit and sort of use it to grow and I do kind of like the idea, to develop, that it's more like a hive mind sort of, that it's because it comes from that one syringe in Page, and presumably they had more of that same serum or whatever it was. So I wonder if it's almost sort of like a hive mind and on the bacterial or microbial level almost, but not exactly sure how that would work. I mean, it's sci-fi, but I do kind of think it might be something like that.
Yeah, I haven't really thought too deeply into what Deathrise is, but my first impression upon finishing it and listening to that creepy epilogue was that it's kind of he and Life Force and what was that creepy scientist's name? Peric, yes. Okay. Life Force and Peric, they were experimenting, and Life Force even wanted to get Mitosis's DNA so that he could experiment on more versions of himself. So in my mind, I was thinking they were playing around with the evolution of the epics as a species. And he's injecting this DNA into Paige and in a way kind of impregnating her with Deathrise.
I know. Does she have all of Life Force's powers now, like all the ones that he merged into himself? Like she healed, like she did. Yeah. I don't know where that came from.
And it's like somebody brought the city down safely.
Gently, yep, and they don't know why.
Yep.
And so this is a slight mention, but it's still about Deathrise. Near the end, when Life Force took on Cloudbreaker's powers, right? So he started off with what is presumably just his own power, which is the healing thing, and he was a gifter. At some point, I wonder if he took on some kind of super strength, because when Jax attacked him for the first time with his brother's sword, like he beat him up. He almost destroyed him with the mitosis motivator. And then when he was about to decapitate Life Force just got up, caught the blade. The blade would just not pierce his skin or whatever. He was moving super fast. He was super strong. And I think there were black veins coursing through him.
Black veins, and it like infected the sword.
Yeah. And so I wonder if that was Deathrise at that point, like Life Force giving in to the demon, essentially, because there's this throughout the whole book, there's this tug of war between Life Force, calm, relaxed, in control demeanor, and the demon who wants to burn and pillage and rip and tear and shred. And yes,
I want to say that during one of Life Force's conversations with Peric, like they talk about like what Life Force did with the black veins.
I think
and it's like something like, it was still like very instinctual. Like I didn't have any control over it. And I thought they described that as in reference to another epic whose abilities they tried to subsume.
Okay. Yeah, that seems consistent with what I remember.
I think that's true, but I also agree with Argent that what animated him to get back up and destroy the sword with that power, that seems like that could have easily been Deathrise.
And then we have later on, when he takes on Wing Flayer's powers, and then even later than that, when he takes on Cloudbreaker's powers, he gets to the point where it is difficult for him to juggle not only the different epics powers, but also the demon that is inside him.
Yeah.
And so he can keep the city afloat, and he can keep the demon in check, but then the frost advances. Or he can keep the demon in check and the frost apart, but then the city starts to collapse.
But then like the demon does break out, and the demon is able to use the powers, and that's what makes the frost worse.
Oh, does that happen? That sounds familiar.
Yes, that happens.
I don't know if
it definitely happens. Yeah.
Okay. See, so my read of Deathrise, and like, because I thought the power mixing thing, that's a possibility. The whole rise anew and the way they would refer to Calamity's rise in the previous books really says to me that whatever this is, it's in some way related to whatever entity sort that Calamity is, that we never really got any more information because Apocalypse Guard died a brutal death. And so I don't know if it's they've accidentally, like, they've pieced together enough of Calamity that they've accidentally made a new one of this species potentially, or if maybe my crazy idea is that maybe this one was destroyed in some way and it's kind of been like trying to get itself back a little bit, and now Calamity's gone. But I think it's something like what Calamity was.
Speaking of that, during the Herschel flashback sequence where Steelheart becomes an epic, which like we do need to talk about that. He describes like Calamity as like glowing brighter and almost changing shape into almost an eye, which just made alarm bells go off in my head. Because like, oh, it's a star that looks like an eye, and it reminded me of eyes that look like stars from the Skyward series. And there is a word of Brandon where Brandon connects Calamity to the Delver in some way. And I'm just looking at all of this very suspiciously. And I'm like, I don't know if there's something actually there, but I'm like,
I'm just going to ignore all of that.
So
I don't.
Yeah, you didn't realize that Brennan only had two universes, everybody.
the Cosmere and the non-Cosmere. The Earth smear.
That was horrifying. I love it.
It's what I'm here for. Horrify people. I do like the idea, David, though, of Deathrise being something like or something akin to Calamity. This essentially, because what Calamity is or was essentially a super epic, right? This was for the purposes of the original trilogy. Even when the Reckoners found out who and what Calamity is, they still refer to him as an epic, but it's essentially a super epic, right? It is an epic that grants epic powers to other people, to other epics. And Deathrise, in its internal kind of monologue to page or whatever, does refer to itself as something more than an epic, something more than a human, right? I am Deathrise. So that's an interesting idea that, boy, do I wish we had Apocalypse Guard. I don't have anything concrete to share on this subject, but at the end of Calamity, and possibly in words of Brandon, I think we find out that, or at least David wonders, whether there was like this external force that created or installed or injected Calamity into this universe, and which opens up like the multiverse plot of the Reckoners multiverse, essentially. And so, if the Apocalypse Guard was the series or the book that was going to explore this multiverse, and I believe we do have a word of Brandon that says we're going to find out more about Calamity in Apocalypse Guard, then I wonder if we are seeing something similar here, like this external to our universe, to this Earth that we read about, entity or force or organization or whatever it is, like injecting super beings, super entities into this Earth, and then things happen.
I think Calamity, like his race or people or whatever, are just generally a group that does this. So that they because we do know that like he has what's her name, Megan's powers, where she can like travel across the multiverse or do stuff with the multiverse, I guess. So they definitely have the power to traverse it. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be like another higher tier that like injects them there. It's just what they do as a group.
They might be the higher tier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I could see that. Okay, well, do we want to, maybe we'll jump back a little bit. I know people had thoughts on the extended flashback sequence in the beginning and how we felt like that worked, or just, did anyone have any comments on that?
I did not have an issue with it. Granted, I was a little forewarned because you had commented on there being a very long flashback sequence. But in my mind, I really did break down Lux into the 3 novellas. Mm-hmm. So it's like the jumping back, I didn't really see it as a flashback sequence. I saw it as the beginning was a flash forward, which is a fairly common trope in movies and TV shows, where it's like starts like in the middle of the action and then we jump back and like go through events until we reach that point and then continue on. So it worked for me.
Yeah, I think my complaint was really like, I dislike when they show you something really exciting and then you have to go read 8 chapters of getting back to the really exciting part. Like that, I'd rather the first 8 chapters have been a little more interesting / a little more abbreviated. Like you could have pumped up the death of Jax's brother into a little more of an exciting scene and just told that story straight up instead of giving me like, oh my gosh, what happened to Brigand? Oh no, what's going to happen now? Okay, 8 chapters.
Yeah, it was a bit baity. Yeah, I agree. I did think it was too long. I didn't mind the presence of a flashback sequence that much, but it was like a quarter of the book or whatever. And it was, a lot of it was not that interesting to me. Like it was an extended training montage is what it was. And yeah, it established David's interest and skill with
Texas.
God damn it.
For Jax.
Maybe they're identical twin brothers.
Jax's skill and interest in motivators. It introduced Paige and introduced their relationship. I don't think their relationship was all that interesting, and it didn't develop in like it was so obvious that they were going to be romantic interests for one another. It was just not meh to me. But what happened in 12 chapters or whatever could have happened in 4 or 6, I think, and I would have been more satisfied. Also, this is a slight tangent, and I will go into this later, but I am discovering that I don't like the archetype of like the rough asshole sergeant type of character. I did not like Zeph. From page 1, I understood what he was doing, and I am not here for that. More on that later.
So I do agree with you, Evgeni, that the flashback sequence was too long for me, and especially the beginning with like Zeph really like, I don't know, pushing down on Jax, or I don't know, like that is not a particularly new thing, or like it's a very common trope that we have this rough sergeant that just doesn't care about the main character or the character, but actually does care, of course, and so that I could have done without that. I did like the exploration of motivator tech and just see Jax learning it and figuring stuff out there. That was really fun, and I think towards the end of the flashbacks, when we got closer to the present, and when we figured out how they got into the situation, it started picking up again, and then the book really started becoming interesting to me, I feel, and I could have done without a lot of the stuff that happened during the flashbacks.
When we got to Nighthawk, essentially, right?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Well, I didn't mind the development of at least Jax in the flashbacks, but I had a big problem with Paige. I felt like she was really one-dimensional wooden character. Like, she just didn't feel like she had any character development to me. Even when we had the reveal that she wasn't dead, I was like, okay, this girl's back. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I felt really upset about that because I wanted a little bit more from her, because she was supposed to be the love interest and she was supposed to have a big impact when she comes back. And I didn't feel it didn't land for me. And I think that's because the flashback was completely from Jax's point of view, and we didn't get anything about like her and her personality. She was just in my mind's eye while I was listening to it. He was in the workshop tinkering around on top of the tank, and she was like standing in the corner doing nothing until he talked to her.
Yep.
That's my impression of her, and it was really upsetting. And then when she comes back, okay, I guess I'm talking more about Paige now. But when she comes back and she's this sergeant or whatever in the Ravens, a lieutenant, I don't know what she was.
Lieutenant.
She had this epic story about how she killed all these guys and she never faltered. And she's like this amazing martial artist, and she impressed everybody. So she was immediately got given, all this responsibility. And I didn't understand where that came from. It kind of blindsided me.
Yeah. Paige, so in the non-spoiler section, when I talked about how there's a character that I wished they had done more with, that was Paige. Mm-hmm. And my issues are very similar to yours with her, in that she is a bundle of skills that the other characters, mostly Jax, just kind of direct in whichever way she needs to be directed. Right? She is this awesome shooter. She is this awesome fighter. She has information, very convenient information at times, about the layout of Lux and like the ways of Lux and stuff like that. But she barely has any agency in the story, and that bugged me. Like, I am, by the way, listeners and viewers, I am notoriously oblivious about things like that. Like, you give me action scenes and flashy things and big explosions, that is enough to distract me. I see shiny, I go take shiny. For me to notice a problem like that means that there's really a problem like that. And that was the case with Paige. I think the moment when it really stood out to me was after the infiltration on kind of Wing Flayer's compound in Lux. They were escaping from the compound, and Jax was doing Jax had all of the ideas. Like throughout this entire plot sequence, every single thing that moved the plot forward was Jax going, I have this crazy idea. I'm not going to tell you about it, but I have this crazy idea. Just trust me. Just listen to me. Go with it. And then the idea works. And like, his ideas are not that like incredibly smart, right? They're just like, Paige's presence in this story for most of the story is to A, help provide whatever skills Jax needs, or B, impress Life Force so that he can give her Death Rise at the end.
Mm-hmm. And actually spinning off of that, I want to comment on all of the female characters in Lux, because I have issues with all of them.
All two of them? Oh, wait.
There's four. Three and a half.
Yeah,
do we want to focus on Paige at first, though? Because we will get to the other characters.
Yeah.
But
okay.
But if it's a common issue among all of them, like, for sure.
I think it is. Because it's like they're all fairly one note. There's the evil seductress. There's the evil valley girl who is half a character. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like,
Cloudbreaker.
Oh, I couldn't stand.
then
her
there's
voice.
the mother figure whose purpose is to die, to like drive everyone forward.
Mhm.
And then it's the girlfriend who is just kind of there. And it's like, and those are the only female characters in the book. It's like,
Yeah. Like compare those with like with Herschel,
Megan.
who's well, he is the guy who's like the grumpy old man who's not supposed to do anything. He's just like grumps around. He is more interesting and more resourceful than pretty much any of them. Compare them against Wade, who's the nerdy guy who has, I don't know about more character, but a comparable amount of character to any of them.
When we saw Paige again, there were two things that I kind of had hoped for when she like popped back up again, and they were A, that she had like kind of been formulating her own plan while she'd been in, you know, like she's up there, she's gathering information, she's a reckoner, this is what she does. And B, I kind of like, there were obviously incredibly problematic things with Lux, like, it was not a good place, that was a nightmare place, but it was a safe kind of like bubble that was kind of awesome. And I thought that she would have a little more, having spent some time there, just like a little more of a maybe sorrow for like destroying, or at least kind of like, is there any way we can do this without destroying this place entirely? Like she was just kind of like, yep, I've been up here waiting for you to get here so I can destroy it. My mind is not changed at all. I just kind of thought there'd be a little more there. I didn't think she'd betray them or anything, but
there was one very specific moment when they got to Lux, where like the first time they got to Lux, like, and they were looking at the Ferris wheel and the festival that they had going on, or carnival or whatever it was. And Jax was looking at a pair of, I think they were brothers, children playing in a playground, being completely oblivious, just like being normal kids. And like, I thought that was going to be a pivotal moment where Jax is like, oh, wait, I know we want to destroy this city, but there is a lot of people here who are genuinely just innocent in every shape and form. And like, and that moral dilemma did not come back at all later.
That's actually an issue I had with the book, or like the city as a whole, because throughout the book, after they have arrived at Lux, we don't see any civilians, I think. Like, there's literally none of them. They are in a house that has been abandoned, or like the people have moved out or something. So where are all those people that at the beginning were happy and like could have provided some sort of moral dilemma? It's really weird, and it's kind of odd.
I think there's one scene like after the fog rolls in where it's like they can hear them in the distance, but never see them.
Yeah,
like, and they don't really do anything.
Well, while we're talking about female characters, do we want to just roll right into Abigail and kind of talk about? Does anyone have any thoughts or opinions on how Abigail went and her whole character? Or
she died early enough that like I didn't really form an emotional contact. Like, I would have loved for Abigail and Herschel to have like swapped positions, and like Herschel is the one that died, and Abigail is like the grizzled old veteran that like doesn't want to be in charge. And because it was like another chance to have a female character that actually has relevance to the plot, but it's like her purpose was to be fridged, basically.
Yeah, I don't think she did anything other than like be nice to people and lead a little bit, kind of in the interim between Galveston and the attack on Lux. and then she dies, and that's it.
Yeah, I think kind of near the end, Jax was thinking about her and remembering her and looking at I think it was like the 4th motorcycle that she was supposed to ride or something. Yes. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Abigail. Because she didn't really feel like a huge motivator to me for like...
That's why
she's not an epic, so she can't be a motivator.
Thanks.
Right.
Yeah, but I feel like that it at times Jack sort of thought back to her and thought, oh, it's like he's so sad that she's dead, but it never really impacted anything, I feel. But I think what she sort of was intended as, but never really materialized, was like this mother figure for Jax in a way, that she is someone he could like I don't know, confide in and sort of look up to as a mother figure, basically. And we got some of that, but not really so far that I would say it added any depth to her or was really relevant to either the plot or Jax as a character. So
her only real relationship was with Zeph, and Zeph died and she died. So their storyline just died. It ended.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed that little bit between her and Zeph.
Gave them obviously humanity.
Yeah, it didn't go anywhere, but like I was excited to see a little bit of, these are essentially war veterans who are in love.
Yeah, that was probably like the strongest moment of characterization for her, is that they were kind of just, they were together and they didn't know how long it was going to last because, either of them could die at any moment. And I also kind of thought that Brigand, after his betrayal, like his whole guilt was kind of centered around like, I really let Abigail down. And I'm like, well, I don't remember you and Abigail interacting. So like, it just didn't connect.
Yeah.
How did people feel about Brigand and his betrayal? Because that was something that I was kind of mad on.
As soon as he got scarred, I'm like, you're going to go down a dark path. I didn't expect it to be cut short quite so soon. I thought like he was going to be like an endgame villain. Because of course, as soon as like he got captured, I'm like, okay, this is when he betrays the rest.
Yep.
And then he died. I'm like, I don't really feel bad. I was expecting more to happen with you.
Yeah. I was concerned that he was going to last a long time and he was going to be this kind of reluctant villain character that we're kind of forced to empathize with. Like when we got his essentially interlude, right? When he was cooking his steak. I was like, we're going to get sequences from him here and there, and he's going to feel bad. And Brandon and Steven are going to try to make us empathize with him. So I'm glad that didn't happen, because I didn't care about that at all. Like the level of treachery this person committed just instantly put him in, okay, you are virtually irredeemable in the scope of a single novel kind of level to me.
He did have kind of a Moash thing going on, but and just in like that, like he is a traitor, and then there is a sequence where you are like, are we supposed to feel bad for this guy? Like maybe I can see it a little bit, but then it's over. And that was my biggest surprise. I really was like, we got a point of view for him. I wonder where this is leading to, and it just kind of ended. Like I was like, I guess we didn't really need that. Although we got the callback to the pile of vomit.
When Jax was like testing his strength against Brigand for the first time, I was like, they're going to be like big rivals in this book. Because, Brigand's a little older, he's attractive, he's got the girls, and that didn't go anywhere. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities with characters. So I think, in my opinion, the weakest part of this book was the side characters.
It does feel like there were a lot of opportunities that were just not taken throughout the book.
I almost want, like, we obviously don't have the sequel yet, but I almost wonder whether it would have been, or where it could have gone if Brigand was the one to have like successfully taken on Deathrise. Because I also feel like with Paige being the one to have it now, we are almost starting to retread some of the same ground that we did with Megan and David, because it's sort of the love interest that might be turning evil, and they have to protect her from that now. So there definitely will be some similarities. I totally expect that. And it could have gone in a completely different direction with Brigand, who somewhat willingly took it on because he, of course, decided to betray them. And so, yeah, I wonder whether that might have been, or where that could have gone. Of course, we won't ever see that, but maybe that might have been interesting to see. And it would have given some purpose to those scenes we have from his point of view. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Paige is no Megan. I mean,
yes, yeah, definitely.
One of my biggest fears as I was listening to this book was that at the end, Jax was going to get epic powers.
Yes, that was because there's the scene where like he does stop like the life force is healing from Wade, and it was very suspicious. It's like, I'm glad that we got a legitimate explanation for that, but that was like, does he have some sort of epic nullification power like Languish does?
Yeah.
Like, that was also one of my worries. But I'm glad it did not go that direction.
I had the same thought, and he had some dark, ragey moments where I was like, "Is this Calamity influence? Like, or is this you?" Like, like when he almost threw the guy off the thing, I was like, "Is this?" I can't tell how much it's supposed to be you, or if something else is influencing you here, but evidently not.
And they did sort of open up the potential for him to become something like an epic, at least in a way, because with how what idea he gave to Lifeforce or Peric with the linking action potentials to the motivator or like the epic DNA. So I hope, or I think that this will go somewhere, at least in the following books, because it's sort of, he is a motivator tech guy and might figure something out there, just like David was the lawist or whatever they were called and figured stuff out about the weaknesses. So I totally expect him to further develop motivator tech and probably, or I think almost definitely, to the point where it actually becomes integrated with the human.
Maybe.
Did they ever harvest any of Languish's DNA?
They did. They got 3 vials.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do
That's
anything.
going to be I think that's going to be a plot point in the next, next book.
Yeah, because they were going to do the Languish vapors.
Oh,
yeah.
And then Languish just came back and did it himself.
So I did have this as a I have a section in the outline for issues with the book, and it feels like we talked about more issues than not so far.
Yeah,
I do have an issue with this plot idea that doesn't go anywhere, which is the Languish vapors, right? Hey, we're gonna take a bunch of Languish DNA and then we're gonna vaporize it and then flood the compound, the palace, with that, and that's gonna nullify like that's not how epic powers work at all. Like, at best, what's gonna happen is Life Force is going to breathe the particles in. They're not power, they're just molecules of DNA, and then he's going to either destroy them inside his body or gain Languish's powers, like he's done with other epics so far. So that's
he already did inject himself with Languish's blood, because like that's why Languish thought like his powers wouldn't work against Life Force, because there was too much of his own blood already running through his veins.
Sure, yeah, okay.
He didn't use that power ever, though, that I recall.
No.
Which seems like well, I guess he wasn't very good at using stolen powers.
But Languish didn't want to use his powers on him anyways, because that would kill himself.
Mm-hmm. That was the other thing. Yeah.
Let's go back to characters, though.
That felt weird to me.
Yeah. I do agree, though. Let's see if there's, we can talk about Jax, which we've kind of talked around if we want to. If anybody has any maybe overall thoughts on Jax, because he's sounded more and more like a David parallel as we talk about it, and I've seen more and more like, oh yeah, there's that parallel and there's that parallel.
Jax can't be a David parallel because David is a gun nut and Jax sucks with guns.
Oh,
so they're completely
there you go. I actually like Jax more than David, but that might just be because I really couldn't stand David's personality. And I liked Jax a lot more. I felt like he was, I don't know, just a more emotional character for me to like connect with than David. Just personally. And then I loved his development with his brother and his motivation for wanting to kill epics, of course, and that kind of tied in at the end with Vera and everything. So I liked Jax more than David.
I think I did too.
I don't know which one I like better. The most notable thing to me with Jax is his knowledge and interest in motivators, and I can't separate that from some of the very convenient leaps in logic as he was working on whatever. Like sometimes his discoveries were, hey, what if I try this random thing and then it just works? And some of them do come with like hard work and experimentation and weeks of whatever. But sometimes it's just like, hey, we have 4 minutes to do this thing. We don't know how we're going to do it. What if we do that? Oh, it worked. And
let's just throw a coiler on that motivator. And
just reverse the polarity, and it's fine. and that just bothers me.
I like them both. I do think David would inch out to be my favorite of the two, just because Jax is a darker character, and like David is kind of like a nice guy. Like Jax is kind of brutal and would totally throw somebody off a floating city. And I'm like, I don't think David would do that.
Yeah.
But they also had very different upbringings, I think. You know, Jax had this kind of twisted upbringing in the coop anyways, with Zeph being so hard on him, and he's like got this one track mind, Reckoners only, you know.
Really needed Page to kind of balance them out.
I don't find it particularly fair comparing them quite yet, because like we have 3 books of David to look back on and only 1 for Jack so far, so that he has a lot of development to go through. But I agree with Ian that he does feel a lot darker in place and like goes further goes farther than David would. I think that also has something to do with like how David was sort of brought up by his father to sort of revere epics in a way, or they at least have some hope that epics might turn out good, while Jake just has always seen the bad side of epics, and as such has a much stronger hatred for them, I feel.
I could see that. Although he had a little bit like, you know, when he ran out to Lovestruck, it was like, oh, it's a superhero.
But
he was just a little kid.
He I don't know how the age difference
11,
between David at the bank and Jax in Boston.
I think they were both about 11.
Okay.
So similar age. But then Jax was in a military camp training for 6 years, and David was in an orphanage workhouse.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Let's see. We can touch on the other ones briefly. We probably better move along from character, or at least the Reckoners here in a sec. I thought Wade was a walking plot device with a fun personality. Like any tech problem that propped up that the plot needed him to solve, Wade could solve. And any that they did not want him to do, he could. Oh, I can't get in the red door, but I can create an algorithm that will tell you where all the ravens are based on some sort of predictive technology. Like,
That's one of the bullet points I have listed under problems, is just hacking.
Yeah, we've got some computer scientist people here that probably have a much better idea than I. Yeah.
I mean, you can explain a lot with, hey, I'm gonna throw this box with a magnet on it on this tower, and it will do the thing that I want it to do. But it's just so, and also the fact that he's like doing things on the fly, like hacking into system while he's running, and he's doing this on his essentially wristwatch. I exaggerate. It's a handheld computer essentially, but like. The fact that he can do this on demand at any point of time and do whatever he wants with that is just that. No.
Yeah.
He was a really fun, colorful character, though, in the group. I really liked his accent, and man, McLeod Andrews does an amazing job with these conversations between, Herschel and Wade are the two most opposite characters there could be, and they would just talk back and forth with each other, and it was really, really fun to listen to. Wade, at least.
Yeah,
it was great. I had never enjoyed an audiobook performance in that way before, but it was so fun. Let's see. Any thoughts on Herschel? He actually, most of these characters as we're talking, I'm like, there weren't a lot of character arcs that occurred.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
Which I think is maybe what we're kind of ending up hitting on for a lot of them. But
one of my favorite parts of the whole book was Herschel's backstory retelling. Yeah. That was probably my favorite chapter in the whole book. I loved it.
I had an interesting experience with that because, as established, I finished this book like 4 hours ago, and I heard that flashback last night, but somebody made the outline we're using a couple days ago, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be on the episode. I should open the outline, not thinking about the fact that I haven't finished the book. So I saw, the only thing I saw was Herschel Steelheart backstory, and I'm like, oh, close. And then like, so it's like I was like expecting, like, so I knew that was coming, but I also didn't love it.
Oh,
because I feel it undercuts Steelheart in the original series, making him this special forces person. Because in the beginning of Firefight, like David finds out like a brief like backstory for him, like, oh, he was a high school track star, he was a bit of a bully, and he was just a guard at some factory. And I'm like, oh yeah, like he was kind of a nobody in the old world. So like retroactively making him a super cool special agent, I'm just like, I liked him being boring more.
Just a bully.
Well, they had to really play up the fact that Languish and Life Force were Target employees. So I didn't mind it so much. I actually really loved that because I could totally see, like, I've worked in retail. I could see this love triangle between 3 Target employees. And then all of a sudden they get superpowers and it turns into this like really dramatic, epic story.
So I really liked Herschel as a character in general. Like with how he constantly like had them guessing how he lost his leg, and it was fun to hear him. But with the Steelheart reveal, it does have some issues. I agree that also why did he go to Chicago after that? Steelheart, that is like, why didn't he stay in Russia or wherever and do stuff there? But as a flashback for Herschel and Steelheart, I really liked it as just the chapter in general. It was just cool to read, I guess, or hear, and also like see actively the transformation for an epic, what that would look like in the early days, at least. Like we saw it somewhat with David, but also not really because it was weird circumstances.
Yeah, like in terms of this book, I think it's great. It's just going back to the original series, like it loses something. Like and this is the canon now, and it's like I'm fine with David not knowing that, like he was actually not secret agent, special forces person, because that's secured information.
Yeah.
Like that wouldn't be easy to access. It's just like I liked Steelheart just being a bully.
It also made me think kind of like, I respect Herschel's gimmick with I'm getting a bunch of candy out of guessing my backstory, but that could have been valuable information to the lorist that you saw the creation of Steelheart and any information, and he was just like, I'm going to sit on it. Like, I don't really need to, like, I'm getting a lot of candy out of this.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, so I thought about that, and there's a piece in this book where we are told that Reckoner cells don't really share information. And so that helps with that, right? So Herschel is just like, he's living his best life with like the few dozen people that come to the coop and whatever, and they're fine. Or I guess Herschel was not in the coop most of the time. He was doing his own Texas things. But the fact that they don't share information explains why this is not something that he's shared with others. But also that's dumb.
Yeah.
And there are networks of lorists that exist and share information. So
yeah, like there is a Reckoner's lorist network that gets mentioned, and like Prof connects all of the cells. So like, did you tell Prof at least?
Who was actively working on a mission to take down Steelheart?
Nah.
It was a good gimmick though. He had a good time with it. So it didn't bother me over much. It was just something that I noticed. Yeah. And I did like how there was a moment when I was reading and I was like, why isn't Herschel running this team? And I liked how it explained his hesitance with leadership and kind of, he almost even had like a little mini arc. So I was like, okay, like I could see that. Yeah.
One thing I did enjoy with Herschel's character was this almost hidden like interest in sweets, like because for the most part you would see Herschel and he would be this grumpy, gruff veteran who has no time for frivolities and things like that. And then the moment ice cream gets mentioned, he's a kid. Like he will rush into the kitchen and look for an ice cream there, and then he will get upset because somebody put an empty box of ice cream in the fridge, which, by the way, is a federal crime. If you if you finish the box of ice cream, throw the sparking box out.
You're officially worse than Life Force if you do that.
Oh my God.
And Steelheart and Vera combined.
I did like that whole, I guess, sequence with the ice cream in general a lot, because it did give some, for one, moments of what's the word, levity?
Yeah.
It gives some moments of levity to this otherwise very dark story, and it also had like these characters had opinions on ice cream, and that sherbet, I can't remember what flavor it was, but that the sherbet isn't proper ice cream, and so yeah, that was at least some character moments I feel that we got in this book that were necessary for these characters to have, like, just as a way to have something from them. Yeah.
Which, for the record, by the way, sherbet is not an ice cream, and it's awful. Yep. And if you disagree with that, don't at me. You're wrong.
I've never heard.
Write in the comments whether you think sherbet is ice cream or not.
I wouldn't call it ice cream, but depending on the flavor, it is good. It's just not ice cream.
All right, we found Wade.
No, I am not Wade, because Wade thinks it's ice cream, and it's not. It's its own thing.
And you can't hack any unhackable system at a snap of your fingers. In terms of the other Texas Reckoners, I think Zeph is the only other major character to talk about. I didn't mind the classic kind of tough love archetype, although I'm like, this is also child abuse. Like, I don't think you should make a kid stand in a pole for hours and hours a day. Not good. But I did love his "we don't play their games." That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
I did like when they're doing the rewiring scene. It's not like Zeph, very problematic person, But Jax isn't the one that screwed things up. It was Brigand getting in over his head and panicking. And I just want to go back to Brigand very briefly.
Okay.
The line where he's like, we need to do this. You owe it to me. I was so infuriated at him. And I'm like, no, he doesn't. That's not how this works.
Nope.
And I was like, I knew it was like, this isn't going to work. Like, this is the wrong thing to do. But Jax did it.
And it was also obvious that Jack was going to fall for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. As far as Seth is concerned, I did like that, like from his general demeanor and like appearance, you would think like he's somebody who is more made for the for the heavy duty work, and like he if he was in the field, he'd be more concentrated on what Herschel does, is like blowing stuff up, and he would go in guns blazing. But when they were in, I can't remember which city it was, but where they meet Nighthawk, and like he's furious when Jax doesn't act or doesn't understand like that they have to act covertly, and they don't give away secrets. I felt like that was a really great moment to show that he does take this very seriously, and he's a reckoner and not just some guy who likes torturing kids. And I just felt like that was a nice moment for him.
I personally really liked Zeph as a character. I like that kind of archetype personally. I know that some people here absolutely do not, but I do. And the scene where Jax went into the vent and overheard him talking to Prof about, that boy is what did he call him? A prodigy.
Genius.
Yeah, something like that. So I had that feeling in my heart. I'm like, yeah. So I really, really liked his character, and I loved how he grew from being this like a very abusive person. But he actually has Jax and the Reckoner's best interest at heart, and that's why he did it. So he kind of had to make that judgment call on being extra tough on Jax because he knew what Jax was capable of. So I felt like that was very successful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just take issue with it, right?
It's like it's very problematic behavior. It's like you should not treat children like that. But in that world, like, Zeph is not Jax's father. Like, he is not his guardian. Well, he is his guardian, covert, kind of, more or less, but not how we would define guardian. He was training a soldier. Child soldier is very problematic in its own right, but Zeph had a mission. Not good, but
yeah. And he gave him a chance to walk away. Like, he did say, like, this is what this is going to... Well, at the beginning, like, you're a kid, so that's, that's the context of all of this. It's a story, so I think it works a little better as a story than if you met Zeph in real life. But, like, he did say, like, the question was asked, are you going to be committed to this? And, like, do you understand kind of what you're getting yourself in for? And he did stick with it.
When you're 11, you don't understand these things.
Right. You can't really
make a story
decision like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, post-apocalyptic world, it makes sense in the context for me.
Yeah.
I will say I did enjoy their relationship a lot more kind of after the Prof meeting with Zeph. So like once Jax, I had to think not to say David, knew that Zeph actually had respect for him, I think their relationship became a lot healthier and a lot more interesting too. Like Zeph was still grumpy and reluctant with his compliments, but the fact that both of them knew of their mutual respect meant that it was a lot more like banter and a lot less like abuse.
And I thought that, the way that he was paying Jax that compliment while he was also suspecting that he was listening in, like that was also for Jax. And the way that he, like he was reading all of his notes and Jax would coincidentally find the piece of machinery that he would need. Like that was sweet. Like there was some affection in there.
I like that.
Yeah, and the last sequence where Lux is following them was awesome. Like that was a tense, scary, really, really cool set of chapters.
Let's talk about epics, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about them. The 4 or 3.5.
I wanna open with Life Force again because I don't think I am entirely clear on how his powers work.
Yeah.
So he has a healing factor, right? He has the ability to seemingly transfer wounds to anyone who he's touching, right? I think that is his baseline power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he's also a gifter. He can give that power to anyone else, which is what he's doing with like all of the Ravens and essentially anyone else in Lux, right? The problem is, like you have to have somebody to transfer the wound to, and you have to be touching that person, and so he gets around that with the whole system where he drains blood from people, and then he injects it in himself, and so he's essentially touching all of the people in the corridors all of the time. I don't necessarily understand how that works for, let's say you were a Raven, okay, and you've done a building has just, or a chunk of road has just fallen on this stupid Reckoner's girl that you were trying to kill, and then she crawls out of the wreckage somehow, and you go to finish her off, and she kills you. So the Raven then engages the power that allows him or them to transfer their wounds to somebody they're touching. And that power comes from Life Force's gift.
Mm-hmm.
And so it allows the Raven to transfer the wound to anyone Life Force is touching, which is anyone in the chambers below.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my understanding of it, is that as part of the gifting, it includes the people that Life Force is touching in that, the people that they can draw on. And they're kind of essentially using his power as if they were them. Because I don't see any other way that could be happening.
So
yeah.
Yeah, what's up?
I just don't.
I wonder whether he actually is a gifter. Because I don't think so. Because the way I think his powers work, like he can gift them, but more in the way that he can sort of the flow of wounds, sort of like the healing factor can go both ways. If he touches you, you could also technically, or he could transfer your wounds to himself. Like it's just an exchange of, I don't know, the tissue or whatever. And so.
And then later transfer those, or not later, but at the same time transfer the wounds to.
Yeah, exactly.
So like he's a bypass essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's sort of the central node in this network of people touching each other more or less, and it all flows through him, right. And he can control sort of who has access to it. So or who has access to whom. So he can say, okay, all Ravens can heal from the people in the chambers below, but they can't heal from myself. Like I will always forward it. I will not let them take from myself.
I would prefer that, because those of you who have read the Reckoner original series more recently, I didn't think gifters could give powers to other epics.
I looked it up, and I actually was going to address that too. What it stated is Conflux and Prof cannot gift their powers, and they don't know of any other epics that cannot gift their powers to other epics, and they don't know of any other epics that can gift powers to other epics. But not that it is impossible. There might be something else that happens in a later book, but that's what I found in Steelheart.
Okay.
So it isn't quite a canon break, but it was something that I know stood out to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of like my thought, because it wouldn't. Why would, after he gifts the powers, why would they still have access to those he is touching? It's sort of, it's a little weird, I find, because other gifters don't work that way. I think like they actually get the power, and use the power as you would, or as the epic would.
Yeah.
So.
Oh,
So
and the
instead,
epic
maybe you
doesn't
think
have
that
the power.
he makes a link between
Oh,
them
he
instead
still
of
has
gifting.
power. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a gifting is like he just he replicates the power sort of in them. The epic regains or retains the power, and the other person also gets the power. But it's not like it would be weird if they could, or if touching the other people would be part of the power. Just in my mind.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I don't think he had the Raven DNA inside him. So if he's not giving them the power, then how is he touching that? You know, I don't recall. I don't recall him getting Raven injections. I thought he just had in the tubes.
We see the scene where he turns Brigand into a Raven, right? And all that's happening in that scene is that Life Force goes and slashes mortally wounds Brigand. And then he grabs his head, and Brigand is restored.
But when he touches him that moment, so
yes,
it's ambiguous at least in this case. So he might have injected his blood later on.
He could have. I just don't remember that being mentioned.
He also, when he captures the Reckoner's team, he drains blood from all of them, including Paige, who has been a Raven for like 6 months.
Yeah.
That is true.
There we go. That's a good point.
Yep.
Which, by the way, did not end up being a significant factor in most of the book. The fact that he drained all of them, like he was there for Abigail's death, essentially.
Yeah. Well, it's because it's like after that point they had the silver rings. So like they couldn't be drained.
Yeah,
like,
you're right.
Partway through, it's like that was also like I started thinking it's like Jax put a stop to the healing that was weird, and then like none of them have been damaged because of the blood, and like it was like a weird like I thought it was going to be a plot hole, and then we found out it's the weakness.
Yeah, but because it was soon after that Herschel gave him the rings, right?
Yeah. But my other main issue with Life Force's abilities is that when Life Force dies, the healing gets undone, and like that makes zero sense to me because like it's been healed, like it's you transfer that to other people. Like I could maybe see it if like the people that those wounds had been transferred to were still alive, like they would just transfer back. But most of them are dead. I don't think it should snap back at that point.
Yeah. It was pretty well established that it's gonna work like that, I think. Like there had been scenes previously where Life Force healing was failing. And like we saw that when he withdrew his healing power from Cloudbreaker. And like a wound that she had received years ago.
Yeah, like I understand it's consistent. I just don't think it should have happened.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I'm saying is what these scenes show us, I think, is that this is just how his power works, right?
Yeah, like
which I don't understand, but the fact that it's consistent and it has been established to be consistent is at least okay.
Yeah, it was also a necessary plot point because that was the big part with Languish and Vera.
I also don't understand how he can withdraw his healing power.
Yeah.
Well,
I feel like
gifting, you can take the powers back. So if like he is a gifter,
but if he's not,
well, he's
that's true.
He's just reversing it. If it isn't like a gifting, and he's actually just,
I could see the power working sort of as it's not healing; it's actively keeping this exchange happening. Sort of like it needs maintenance. It's a weird thing to have, but it
Yeah,
can work.
it's a little weird. I thought it worked plot wise really well, though. That would be what I would say on the counter argument. Is I really liked the threat that it allowed and like the leverage it gave him over everybody else in the story, and the fact that he would mortally wound all the ravens. So if anybody ever tried to get at him, they were done. Like that was really cool. And moving on a little bit from the fact that his powers are a little confusing. Like, what did we think about him as a character? Because I thought he was a pretty compelling villain.
Oh, he was so cool as a villain.
Yep.
Yeah.
The retail worker scorn. And he was creepy, so creepy with his painting of the Sabine women.
Sabine women, yeah.
Cutting them, and oh gosh, he was very effective as a villain. Oh my.
Yeah.
I would say, like, of like the three main epic villains of the original trilogy, like I like him more than the other three. Like Steelheart, Regalia, and Calamity. Life Force, way cooler and scarier and intimidating.
Yeah, I'd also liked the kind of split aspect of his personality, where the Death Rise was coming out, and then he would go back to Mr. Smooth, polished. So I just bought you a Fabergé egg because you're going to be valuable to me. You know, like it was a really fun dichotomy, and you kind of never knew what you were going to get from him in a given scene.
Yeah. I don't know how much I can say about him other than I liked him as a villain. I think he worked well.
I liked his counterpoint language as well. And the other retail worker who went the other direction, because he is a gifter of his power, right? He gifts his
language.
Doesn't he? I guess maybe he doesn't gift it. He just is able to affect them, huh?
Yeah. He's just around.
He's got an AOE.
Yeah.
And one last comment on Life Force is, like, I do kind of wish we had seen Jax forced to work for him for like a brief amount of time, because that was a dynamic I thought would have been very cool. Like, but no, Jax just escaped before that.
Yep.
Like, oh
yeah, that's one of the things I have an issue, because like I was so looking forward, because the way I thought the story was gonna go, right? We saw we saw the extremely morbid reveal of the chambers below the palace, or whatever they were, like all the people that were imprisoned in there. And I thought Life Force made an extremely compelling argument. They're like, hey, you should work for me. You might not like it, but also the alternative is much, much worse. And so I thought the way this was going to go was Jax was going to join him and then find a way to like undermine. But Jax just like in the next 15 minutes figured out how to escape.
Which I really thought was cool. Him escaping with his watch and everything.
Yeah, sure.
It was a cool scene. The whole time I was like, why did you not check his pockets? And why is Languish not shutting down the power that Brigand definitely told him that they have? You know, so that was it was a cool scene, but I was kind of like that was the only thing that I would term something that stood out to me as like a little bit of a dumb villain move, you know?
Oh, like leaving Herschel his leg.
Oh yeah. Although yeah, I could see that too. Well, it's a valuable leg. Let's see. We want to go on and talk about Languish, because I think he was the other kind of standout epic, aside from
Yep.
So I liked Languish, and I appreciated that. So from the original trilogy, we know that the more an epic uses their power, the more kind of they give in to the dark side. And Languish's power is very situationally useful. Like, he barely gets a chance to use that. He only essentially uses that when other epics attack Lux, right? And so the fact that he doesn't use his power a lot means that it is very consistent that he has retained a lot of his humanity, even though he's been epic for such a long time. And so his, not joining the Reckoners, but like his aid to the Reckoners was not only interesting to me as a plot arc, but also consistent with the established canon. And I kind of liked him. Like he's a little bit of a wizzo, but he's also a bit of a good guy.
Mhm.
But he also likes expensive things.
He reminded me of Conduit in a way from the original trilogy, because he sort of Conflux, right? Not Conduit. Conflux, right? He reminded me a little bit of him, because they sort of kind of fill a similar role within the city. Like they provide a relatively crucial function, but aren't really at the forefront. They're like pretty content with their life, and leave it to the higher epics to sort of do the day-to-day business. But I also really liked him, and he was nice to have around them, and like at the end provide sort of these crucial details to them and help them figure stuff out. And I just liked him.
Yeah, his whole water with lemon thing, I thought that was a great characterization. Or he's just like, just give me my water with lemon. Like, don't, like, we're gonna be polite. You're not gonna kill me. I'm not gonna be a problem. Just get me some water with lemon.
You want to interrogate me? That's gonna go a lot better if I'm not parched.
Yeah.
It's like you can definitely see he's been living the life of an epic and all of that entails, but he hasn't succumbed to the darkness. And so like he's just kind of a chill dude that isn't a good person, but like I'd like to hang out with him, maybe.
Yeah. He's one of the few people whose life probably got better post Calamity, from being a retail employer to being somebody who is kind of like an idol. I guess he's a prisoner, but
for his unrequited love.
Oh, true. Yeah. Well, we can talk about Vera, however that's spelled. And I didn't expect that. I thought Wing Flare was Heartbreaker for a period of time. I was very confused. Because it had a kiss thing they were both doing, and I was like, "Oh, is that the same epic that has like kind of further succumbed?"
Yeah, there was a brief period for me. I think before we got to the flashbacks, kind of in the lead up of like Galveston's attack, where I thought they might be the same person. And then just the fact that they have very different powers led me to believe that this is not the case. But there was narratively, it felt like, oh, this would be a reveal that this is a reveal that could fit this story in this place.
Yeah. In the flashback, like right before Dan died, I thought it was going to be Wing Flare that killed Dan. But when it was Love Struck, I'm like, okay, these are just two different people. Like Jax hates Wing Flare for another reason. And so I didn't really connect those two at all. But I did not expect Vera to be Love Struck. I didn't. I feel like it could have been foreshadowed better. It's like
it was not foreshadowed at all.
It was not exactly. Like I think if Languish had like made an offhand comment of like, oh, like you can't spurn like a high epic like that and just walk away. If they had added like, even if she was an epic herself, I think that would have been enough foreshadowing for me. At least it would have been something.
Yeah, they could have gone even more subtle in their flashback with Languish and Life Force and Love Struck together. Like she could have just like blew a kiss at them or something, and that would have tied back to her little signature move.
It could simply have been like they were near a target or something, like
or an outfit thing. That is another thing that I have an issue with in this book, is just in the moment the Vera Love Struck reveal felt, oh, that is interest, and then it just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Because presumably she's dead now.
I don't remember.
Yeah, like she just like runs away and then.
Well, he Life Force killed her over and over and over again. So when he died, she must have died.
Yeah, he thinks that she died from hunger many times over, and so.
Oh,
yeah.
What a way to go! Oh,
interesting. I knew that Vera was last struck because I looked something up on the cover mind.
Oh no!
And accidentally spoiled myself. So I was just like, because the cover mind said, like, on the General Epics article, I just flew over it for looking for something. I can't even remember. It said Love Struck and something like Life Force's girlfriend. I thought, when will some girlfriend of Life Force come out? Like the whole book, I was just waiting for her to come up. So that particular reveal didn't surprise me. But I found the entire weakness thing that was framed around her for Life Force. That was a really nice reveal. And I thought from the beginning when the ring got brought up by Jax, I thought, okay, that ring is going to be relevant because why ever would he wear that ring? And so that was nice foreshadowing, I feel, for that in that moment. And then as soon as Life Force, or I think Languish told the story of how Life Force proposed to his girlfriend, I thought, okay, that's probably related to his weakness. But I still like the reveal a lot overall, like how it came into play at the end. Yeah.
I didn't catch on the weakness thing at all, or didn't pay attention to the ring at all. And in typical Brandon fashion, the moment it happened, it was obvious in hindsight. And this is one of the things that I have under the things we liked about the book in the outline. I loved the way all of the weaknesses panned out. Now, we didn't get all of them, like we don't know what language is this, for example. But the ones that we did get, which were Wing Flare, which I imagine we're going to go into next, and Life Force, they worked great. Like the execution was sublime.
And I thought it worked well in not kind of violating the sort of fact that they don't know that the weaknesses are tied to their past necessarily. Like it still worked out and they found it kind of organically without Jax having a parallel revelation about that. I thought it worked out.
I predicted the silver ring as soon as her proposal issue happened. But the one that stood out to me was Wing Flares, which I did not predict at all. Even as Jax was hitting her with the sound gun thing, and he's like, "It's broken bones." I was like, "Yeah, he's gonna get her." Nope. So that one really got me.
I had a feeling that like broken bones weren't going to be it. Like that's too easy. Like I don't like that.
And for her, I thought because her file also, or like her diary brought her mother up a lot, I thought, okay, it's probably going to be related to her mother somehow. And in the end, it was because how she felt treated or wanted to be treated and wanted to play games, but never was able to because of her bone issues. And so I did sort of call that one, but of course the details were not clear to me. But I really liked it in the end, how it played out again with her sort of playing a game.
Were so good.
Yes.
They were really tragic.
Yeah,
I know. It's the first epic that I have legitimately kind of felt sorry for, like after having read most of it. I'm trying to think of there have been some in the original trilogy I'm not thinking of, but I was like, damn, like this was a sad little girl who got superpowers that made her angry, you know? Like,
and in retrospect, just going through like all of the scenes where we see Wing Flare do things, it makes sense that the fact that she has osteoporosis something, like the fact that she always levitates in this completely still and composed form, where there's like nothing out of order, nothing out of place. She's as still as a statue. Makes a lot of sense. Like that's a very consistent thing for her to do. All of the games that she played, like the entrance to her compound is a game. Well, now, if you lose the game, you die. But and the appeal of the treasure, like if you cross the perilous path, if you complete this quest, maybe there's a treasure for you there at the end. The game that she plays with Wax, where Wax? What?
He's just giving him all kinds of names.
The game that she plays with Calamity. Where she, I have no idea what I said. Where she like continuously rebuilds and rearranges the room, so it's like this. It's literally a puzzle, right? All of this is so consistent with her character and with her past, and ultimately with her weakness. That I really liked how that worked.
Yeah.
The thing that really made me think that the bones thing was her real weakness was because when they were walking through her cool palace, they noticed that the vases and the sculptures were floating, but then when they touched them, they wouldn't move. So I was like, oh, that makes sense. She doesn't want them to fall on her and break her brittle bones. So that was so good for me. I really fell for it.
I was all in as well on it. I'm like, yeah, he's got it.
I really enjoyed when she tried to sort of, again, playing a game and try to trick them into thinking what her weakness was. With the point, or like her elegy. That was a really fun scene.
I do wonder. So they're sitting on a table, Wingflayer, Jax, and Paige, and there's nuts, peanuts, or whatever on dishes in front of them. And at this point, Wingflayer clearly has control over them. Like she's holding them in place, right? And there's an extended sequence where she keeps trying to convince them to play this game. And they're just refusing. Well, I say they, but Paige is there as background. When it becomes clear to her, at some point it has to become clear to her that they're not going to play. And presumably she knows her weakness. So like, why does she not just crush them?
I'm not sure if she knows her weakness. She likes playing games, like, because she never was able to as a kid. But she's not necessarily, like, if she knew her weakness, she just wouldn't attempt playing games, I feel like.
I don't know if that would protect her, though. Because it's like, then nobody's playing games with her.
That is true. Yeah, okay.
So, like, she has to make the attempt.
Like, I don't know.
She has to trick people.
It is a little more of a fluid weakness than other situations. And I think she's got some experience, like, forcing people to play games. Like, that's kind of her thing. But I think, so it must be kind of like a threshold at some point where she, like, where she decides they won't listen. But I do think, like, a reason that she would keep having them play is because we just keep seeing she still has a very childish mindset. And so it's not that she's not thinking, oh, if I keep pushing on this, it's going to trigger my weakness. She's thinking, I want them to play a game with me. And like, that's the motivation. Like, I don't think she's
why it's her weakness
going about, like, she seems like a quite straightforward character to me.
Yeah. And that's what bothers me. I think it's that, yes, she wants to play a game with them, but it feels like at some point she should go, oh, they're not budging. If I keep pushing and they still don't budge, I will lose my power.
And I don't think she can, like, because like the moment like she makes that realization, her weakness activates. Like there is no like point where it's like, oh, I don't think they're going to play my game. As soon as she thinks they're not going to play the game, her weakness activates, and then she can't do it.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, like
I think that works. That works all right.
Work with
maybe
Seth as well when she like realizes, okay, now he's not playing the game. Like she has to acknowledge that he's not playing the game anymore because he wasn't playing the whole time. So why when would the point be? And when she realizes it, that does make sense. That the rock drops then, or the building.
Yeah. It's a bit of a perception is important in the Cosmere type of situation.
Damn it. The final epic is Cloudbreaker. Does anyone have a sentence or two on Cloudbreaker? Because she was not relevant. Aside from,
Evil
I feel like
Valley girl.
Oh.
That's the sum of her character.
I'd rather have done without her. I think, like, just solve the weather issue in another way, or just not have it by not being so high up, and be done with it.
I was okay with her being there because she showed that life force wasn't able to hold on to two powers at once.
Mhm.
But like, she wasn't a fleshed out character. I wouldn't even really consider her to be like a character at all. And her voice, oh my God. I was like, I need to turn this down.
That is similar to the issue I have with her. And the way I was going to phrase this is I wish she had gotten more development. But I think both of us, Marvin, are saying she did not get enough development.
Yeah.
And your solution is just get her out of the story. And my solution is, well, get more of her into the story. But ultimately, she was there to explain why people can live on Lux when it is this high up in the air. And to have the little confrontation with Life Force at the end.
And then to have the fog at the end.
Sure. Which didn't really have any effect on anything.
I could have done with the frost without the frost as well. Like it did show then that, like, as Danielle said, that he can't control as many powers at once, but it didn't really have an impact on the main characters.
Yeah, I feel like if we had seen Cloudbreaker interacting with anybody before that, ever, because it's like, oh, Cloudbreaker wants to speak with you, and Life Force being like, nah, I'll deal with her when I want to. Like, and then it's like Cloudbreaker just waited for him, basically.
Yep.
And then got tired of waiting and threw a fit and threw a frost.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I definitely think that for the length of the story that they're going for too, it would have been hard to fit in another, like, there are language they're not fighting with. They're already kind of fighting two main villains in both Cloudbreaker, whatever, Wingflare and Life Force. And so it might have been a little too packed to have her be another main force in the plot. But yeah, definitely. I definitely think they were like, oh man, they're going to be really cold up there. And then this character was developed as a response to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I would have maybe have liked for it to go back to a series of novellas and have a fourth novella in there, just so some of these things could just breathe a bit better. Because especially towards the end, it's like a lot of stuff is happening and it's like not giving a chance to really sink in.
It does feel like the last third is just action.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Like let's move into some like final thoughts, theories, or comments. I think we have ended up, as we sometimes do, touching on problems more than things we liked. But I do think the plot was strong and the characters less so is kind of where I'm standing.
I think that's fair. I will go into my problems, because even though I've listed a lot over the course of this episode, and I am surprised. Like, I did not think I have this many issues with this book.
Yeah,
because I thought I liked it, and I think I still do. But this is also the highest number of issues I have identified in a Brandon Sanderson novel. So on top of all of the things that I've mentioned so far, some of the, I think, smaller issues that I didn't get a chance to talk about. Number one, and this is literally the first issue I had with the novel, the origins of the term ravens. Okay. I see all of you are confused.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So the first couple of times we are just told, oh, these are Lux's guards, soldiers, people. They're called ravens, whatever. And we're like, okay, that's fine. It's just what they're called. And then we flash back to the Galveston attack, and we are given the origins of that term. It is Abigail going, oh, we got a bunch of soldiers coming down, black specks in the clouds. They almost look like ravens. So the origins of the name is Abigail going, oh, they look like ravens. And then throughout the rest of the books, this security force of Lux is officially not, like, even within Lux, they're called ravens.
Yeah.
I take an issue with that. And the entire book, I could not let this go. This is a continuity problem.
I don't think it is. It could just, like, Abigail doesn't know what they're called in comparison to ravens. It doesn't. That to me says that others might have made that comparison before, and then they just started calling them ravens.
I think the chances for this coincidence are low. I take issue with it. Moving on. There were some issues in the final sequence where people were able to see through the frost fog thing when I think they shouldn't be able to. That's not too upsetting. There are several instances where things very oddly come in increments of 30 feet, which is awfully convenient for the boomerang motivator. That's convenient. Like, there's a thing where Jax and Paige are escaping from Wingflayer's compound, and they're jumping, they're doing things. Jax is like, oh no, it's 30 feet to the city. Oh, that's awfully convenient, Jax, thank you very much. Or at the end, they're like, oh, it's 70 feet to the tower where we need to throw the magical doobly-doo that's going to solve all our problems. And so, oh, we conveniently have 2 30 feet motivators, so let's jump, and then throw the thing. There's some moments in that final sequence where they jump 30 feet with boomerang and then don't return and don't destroy the boomerang.
When they were doing their computer hackery as well in the Raven headquarters, they left all their tools and stuff behind, and it drove me crazy because I was just like, no, they should all be exploding right now. Like, we need to be bringing them with, like, how are you? That was one thing that just that I had a problem with, but it's a minor detail. But
yeah. The Martha reveal felt like it was being set up as not a big reveal, but like an interesting reveal. And like,
can you have to explain what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because
sorry. The tank. There was like an entire chapter or two where they referred to the tank as Martha, and then they didn't say it was a tank, and so it felt like it was a mystery. It felt like they were going for, oh, what is Martha? It's a big deal. It's this massive Scorch note. When literally the first time it was mentioned, I was like, it's the tank. It's got to be the tank. So that did not land for me at all.
I thought you were talking about Batman versus Superman. Yeah. Like I literally was like, is there a moment like that? Like,
yeah, it's when Superman manifested a tank out of nowhere. Yeah, that's. I did talk about the Vera Lovestruck thing not really having lead up or payoff. It just happened.
I think we can let the problems lie at this point.
No, plus that's all I got.
Okay, yeah. Does anybody else have any final thoughts?
Well, I enjoyed the book a lot, despite the issues we have uncovered here today. But it still was an enjoyable listen. And I'm not an audiobook person, but I found the narration really enjoyable, and the voices he did, and especially towards the for the end when Deathrise was introduced, like that voice put chills on my spine. Like that, it really helped there that it was narrated, because I would not have felt the same reading that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. I am looking forward to see where the sequels will go. This is a promising start, I think, to a new trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Anything from Ian or Danielle?
I didn't have even half as many problems with it as other people do. But my problems with it were character development was weak, and I had some issues with some of the morality of the good guys, like Herschel wanting to torture people and kept punching Peric, even though he knew that the innocent people were getting hit. And some things like that, I was like, this doesn't, I don't know, it didn't work for me. So, and then also with Jax, like kind of being a little bit too bad, like a bad guy kind of motivations and stuff. I didn't really like that. But honestly, this book was perfectly fine for me. I enjoyed it. I'm not normally an audiobook person, but lately I've been reading more audiobooks because I don't have as much free time. So I listen in the car as I'm driving. And this book and the narration was like 5-star, top tier, excellent. So I enjoyed it, and I'm actually really excited about the next book. I'm hoping that we see more of this Dr. Slush guy, or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
The Louisiana chapter. I'm really into that. I love Louisiana. Like, it would be really cool if that's where they go, and to see Paige maybe get some point of view or something, some character development for her. That's about all I have for final thoughts for this.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I really want to see what New Orleans is like.
They could do some really cool things.
They could. And yeah, it's like there are issues with the book, but it was still perfectly enjoyable. Like I said, it's inspired me to go back and read the original trilogy, which I don't know when I would have done that. Though I will say I don't have as much of an issue with Calamity as certain other people. I thought it was a fine book.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, like there definitely were some issues, and some of that stuff I do think we really get to see when in Brandon's main books, the benefits of his team and the people that go through stuff and iron out those sorts of issues. And I don't know anything about the process how this was written, but I do not believe that Stephen Bowles had as much support in that way or has that same exact process. So I think it is harder to get all of those little minute details just right. And so it really didn't end up bothering me in any way. But I like the plot. I thought it was fun. I'm hoping there's some more character development coming down the pipeline in the future. And I'm really excited to see how this ends up merging with the original Reckoners team, because that's what they're saying they want to do. It's going to bring the two teams together and keep telling this story in that wob that I read. So I want to see David as a Superman deal, hanging out with Jax, talking about motivators. Like, there's some cool stuff there. So I'm really hopeful that this did well enough that they are going to continue. It seems like it did, but
it's highly rated.
Curious to see.
And in general, like post-Calamity Society will be interesting to see, like what an impact it had on other places.
One thing we didn't talk about in an explicit section, but we mentioned many times on the episode, was the development in motivator technology. And I think that is one of the things that this book almost entirely did very well. Like there were some scientific issues that I have, but like in general, the fact that they managed to do Magitech but in a science way worked really well, and it's very promising for the future of the series.
I think now it might be time for Who's That Reckoner's Character?
This character is from Roshar.
Menace, Tien,
Tom,
Braze,
Void in drag on a horse. It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw.
All right, and I think we are going to turn it over to Ian now, who has a Who's That Reckoner's Character made specially for this episode. So we're going to see if we know any Reckoner's characters at all.
Yes. So you know how the real version of this game, Who's That Cosmere Character, works, where you send in 5 clues and a character, and we read them out, and we try to guess. But Reckoner's characters, not super popular. So I have created my own Who's That Reckoner's verse character. And we'll see if they can match my skill at coming up with clues. And if none of them do, I do get a point. Just saying that.
For anybody who's keeping track.
I feel like this game might be a little rigged considering your presumed access to the copper mine before this episode started.
I mean, that's the same for every...
I will confess, I did open this character's copper mine page, but I had already come up with 4 of the 5 clues at that point.
Okay.
And the last one, I didn't really use the copper mine for. I just happened to have it open. So, and I will say, Lux characters are a possibility.
Okay.
This character has a secret.
Prof.
It is not Prof.
Shalon. No, not Shalon. Megan.
It is not Megan.
What about Nighthawk?
It is not Nighthawk.
Is it?
He does sort of have a secret.
He's got secrets.
Oh, his
Calamity.
Mhm.
It is not Calamity. Second clue. This character wields epic abilities.
What does it mean to wield an epic ability?
David.
It is not David.
What's his name?
I am so reluctant to guess Lux characters.
Yeah,
Me too.
same.
Because there wouldn't be a good Coppermine page. Well, there still isn't, but you know.
I mean, you don't know. I did say I didn't use the Coppermine page. I didn't say why.
What about Abraham?
It is not Abraham.
Okay, thanks for guessing that because I didn't come up with it. I knew it was something with an A, but
I can't even remember that many characters.
not even come hard.
You
There's
can
like
pass
5 that
if you
get
want.
killed in Reckoner or in Firefight.
Page.
It is not Paige.
I don't know. Let me think of the first character that I can think of. Mizzy.
It is not Mizzy. This character is known for judging others.
What about Val?
It is not Val.
I don't remember who it was.
She gets crushed into a little ball by Prof.
Did anyone guess Megan yet?
I did.
Yes.
Oh, darn it.
Known for judging.
Who's Judgy?
Has anyone guessed Tia? I can't remember.
No.
No.
I don't know if she's judgy. She's just cool.
Is there an epic called Judgment?
I know who it is, but that's fine.
I mean, you can guess.
I already guessed though, so I have to wait around.
Yeah, he did guess.
I'm going to guess Tia because I actually.
It is not Tia.
But yeah, I expected as much.
Jax.
It is not Jax.
Let me go A, B, C, D, E, F.
Here, yeah.
Who's Judgy? I don't even know. I'm drawing a complete blank on every character.
Oh,
I don't think any characters were judges in their previous lives.
yeah. I think there was someone who was.
Really?
But I'm not sure. But whatever. If David has it,
I think David does.
What was that one guy in Excel?
It is not Excel.
Quick question. How quickly can I say a name as you start to say a new clue?
If you want, you can have your guess before the clue, but then if it's wrong, you do not get another guess.
Oh, I'll take that deal.
Okay.
I will take it. It is Regalia. Abigail Reed, I think her name is.
She was Abigail Reed, aka
daytime judge.
Regalia.
Yeah.
Who was a judge and had a TV show called Judge Regalia. Okay.
I remember these things, sure.
Was thinking her.
Yeah. The fourth clue was this character appears only briefly, but their influence is far-reaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fifth clue was this character's original given name begins with an A.
When they first started this Lux and they were talking about Abigail, I was like, what's the timeline? Is there any way this is? And I was like, no, it can't be. But
And then Jax and Jackson for Steelheart.
Yeah.
It's like, why are they reusing all these names?
Wow, you guys remember names? That's amazing.
But
What a name this takes anyway.
Congratulations, David. You have won Who's That? Reckoner's first character.
100% victory rate at the game of Who's That Reckoner's character.
We'll see if someone can contest you in 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, I'll be waiting. Alrighty. All right. Well, I think that is it for our LuxCast. Come to 17th Shard for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could have or ever hope for. You can come find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, and subscribe to us on YouTube. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Lux, or if you think leaving an empty ice cream container in the freezer is, in fact, the worst thing a person can do. You can leave us a review on iTunes and support us on Patreon. See y'all next time.
Bye.
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 Lux appropriate farewell.
Peace.
Caw.